Assalamu alaikum. Just a quick update. Inshallah, we'll start in 5 minutes. I just request everyone to move closer. Jazakumullah khair.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. أياما معدودات. فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين. فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له، وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له، وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداع إذا دعان فليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب نجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعان فليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر صدق الله العظيم الفاتحة
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Ashrafil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahu bi sunnatihi ila yawmiddin. Inshallah, we'll continue with the second portion of the Zakat workshop. If I can just request brothers to move a bit closer. It looks like I'm speaking to a dead crowd. We don't have much time, so we'll try to finish this today. Inshallah, we will finish. So the next portion of the workshop is common transactions. Are they zakatable or not? Meaning these are things that many of us, they're involved, or these things, they have a part of our day-to-day lives. So are we supposed to give zakat or not? So the first is deposits, right? Money given to someone or an institution for safekeeping is zakatable. For example, we deposit our money into the bank. Why? For safekeeping. Does that mean we no longer have to pay zakat on that wealth or not? No, we pay zakat on that wealth. Even if we gave it to another individual to keep for us, protect for us, that wealth would be considered zakatable. Second is down payments. Right? We made a payment towards something, the first portion of that payment. We no longer own that money. Once we send it forward to the seller, for example, we no longer own that wealth, hence what we gave forth in down payment is not zakatable. The third thing we have over here are benefits. We live in Canada, we get many benefits, working tax credits, child benefits, and all other forms of social security allowances are zakatable. These things, the government, they give it to us, it becomes our wealth, we possess it. Hence, it's zakatable. The next is the total value of RRSPs, registered retirement saving plans, or registered education saving plans. These are zakatable. We pay zakat on our RRSP and our RESP, minus interest accumulated. Why? Interest is unlawful. It's not considered our wealth. We're supposed to be giving out to charity. So the interest accumulated on our RRSPs and our RESPs will be deducted. What's remaining is what will be considered our zakatable wealth. Now there's a difference between our RSPs, optional retirement saving plan, and one we are mandated to follow. CPP, we're not allowed to opt out of. That is not zakatable. We don't have access to that wealth. Our RSPs, we can have access to the wealth, we can pull out anytime. Second, or the last thing on this slide from common transactions, are unused expensive personal items such as cars, houses, suits, etc. We mentioned this yesterday also. It's also a part of this slide. These are not zakatable unless these things we have are considered trade goods. The house, the car, something we own for the sake of selling, and the main intent at the time of purchase was sell, we would pay zakat on that. However, if it's extra, we just own a second vacation home. We don't go to it often, but we own it and we don't have any intention of selling it. We do not pay zakat on that second property. Now, the next portion of the slides will focus on debts. Money people owe us. So the first thing we have mentioned over here is a strong debt. That is a debt arising from forwarding loans or goods sold. We gave someone money and we know we're going to get it back. Or we sold something and we're just waiting payment. That wealth is considered ours. We will pay zakat on debt receivable. We'll add that debt that someone owes us as a part of our total assets and pay 2.5%. Now, the next slide, weak debt. This is receivables arising without the exchange of tangible goods. We didn't sell anything, but someone owes us money. For example, our boss, he owes us unpaid wages. He doesn't pay on time. Mahar. There's a woman who got married, the husband didn't give her mahar yet, and she has no idea when she's going to get it. unpaid rent. You own property, someone owes you rent, you didn't receive it yet. An inheritance. Someone in your family passed away, you're owed inheritance, you haven't received it yet. These are debts, but they're weak debts. You don't know when you're going to get them. Zakat will not be compulsory on a weak debt receivable until and unless you receive the asset. Once you receive the asset, you will pay zakat. In the strong debt, you loaned someone money yourself, or you sold some goods. That's a strong debt. Even if they didn't pay you yet, that's considered your wealth, you'll pay zakat on it. In a weak debt, the examples we just gave, unpaid wages, people owe us rent, that's a weak debt that we won't pay zakat on until we actually come into possession of the funds. Now, if someone took years to pay this off, do we pay zakat for the previous missed years or no? For example, one of our family members passed away in 2015. We didn't receive the inheritance for whatever reason until 2020. So from 2015 until 2020, the years I didn't pay zakat or we didn't pay zakat, do we have to back pay? No. We'll only start paying once we receive it. So from 2020. Now this is just a bit more explanation on debts we are owed. So a bad debt. There's two types. One, the debtor acknowledges the debt or the debt. So now if it's acknowledged that, yeah, I do owe you money, then the creditor pays zakat. Now, if you're for some reason unable to receive your money from the person you loaned it to, you won't pay zakat on that wealth if he's giving you a hard time. If it's a strong that you know you're going to get paid, he's not giving you a hard time, he acknowledges it, you pay zakat. Now if he outright denies, I don't owe you money, that money is gone. You do not pay zakat on that wealth because you don't know when you're going to get it. You don't know if you're going to get it. So this is just a bit more an expansion on weak and strong debts. Now, the next slide. Sorry, we just have a lot to cover. Debt liabilities. Now, debts will be of two types, short-term and long-term. We owe people money. Either we'll have to pay in short-term, we have to pay it within a year, or we have years to pay it off. We'll give an example. Short-term, liabilities which need to be paid within the year. You owe someone money and you have agreed upon time that I'll pay you back within 12 months. The total amount of short-term liabilities will be deducted from your zakatable assets when calculating your zakatable assets. So that which has to be paid within a year will be deducted. Now, if you have a long-term debt, you bought a house, you took a loan. You have 30 years to pay it off. Will you subtract the debt of 30 years and then pay zakat or no? What you'll do at this point is you won't subtract the whole debt, the whole 30 years. You'll subtract the payment you owe that 1 year. So for 12 months. For example, you took a loan of $100,000 and you have to pay it back within 10 years. In the upcoming fiscal year, you have to pay $10,000. You would subtract $10,000 from your zakatable assets and pay on what's remaining. You won't subtract the full $100,000. So this is a difference between a short-term and a long-term debt. You're able to subtract your full short-term debt. A long-term debt, you're only able to subtract what's paid or what's owed within the next year. And then you have your total zakatable assets that you pay 2.5% on. Now, these are deductible liabilities. The next slide. Right? It's outstanding, not future. You owe it right now. What are these? You can deduct these things from your zakatable assets. Your basic living expenses, which have not been paid yet. You received the bill, you didn't pay yet. For example, you got your hydro bill on the 29th of Sha'ban. You didn't pay it yet. And your year ends on Ramadan 1st for zakat. Ramadan 1st is your nisab day that you pay zakat on. You can subtract your hydro bill from your zakatable assets because it's an outstanding bill that you received before you reached the threshold or before you met your nisab date or your nisab anniversary. Goods purchased on credit. You used a credit card. You received the goods, but you haven't paid yet. You still have 15 days from your nisab anniversary to pay. You already received the items. You can subtract that bill or that credit from your zakatable assets. And personal loans. This is similar as the last slide. That which needs to be paid within a year, you can subtract or minus from your zakatable assets. For example, we took a loan from an individual for $5,000. Ramadan first comes. That's our nisab anniversary for the sake of an example. We have our total assets, they're $50,000. We have $5,000 we owe someone. We subtract that $5,000. We only pay zakat on $45,000. So that was just a short introduction to zakat on debt and liabilities. Now the next thing is zakat on shares. Now, shares can be divided into 3 or 2 types. We'll break them down. Paying zakat on your shares or your stocks will depend on your intention at the time of purchase. So it can be divided into 3. Number 1, you bought it to buy and hold. If you bought shares to buy and hold, the intention wasn't resale. You either bought it to hold for dividends or to just sit on some wealth. Zakat will not be paid on the full market value of that stock. Zakat will only be paid on the portion of net zakatable assets in the company that you invested in. We'll go into how we find those net zakatable assets of the company also. Now, that's one, buy and hold. And then another is savings and store of wealth, which is very similar to buy and hold. Both of them have the same ruling, that if you bought it to sit on for a bit and you have no intention of selling, you won't pay zakat on that whole portfolio. You only pay zakat on the percentage of the zakatable assets in that company and dividends received. Now, for now, the next slide will go over how to check the balance sheet to see what these zakatable assets of a company are. But this is difficult, and not everyone can do it. So, Mufti Faraz Adam, one of the lead scholars in Islamic finance of our time, he resides in the UK. Him and a group of individuals, they came up with a proxy method. What they did was, they checked the balance sheet of 100 of the top companies in the world. 66 of those 100 had net zakatable assets of less than 25%. So less than 25% of their company were zakatable assets. Yesterday we went over what zakatable assets are. We'll also go over a few examples on the next slide of what zakatable assets are considered in a company. So less than 25% of those companies were net zakatable assets. Now, the other 34 companies were not Sharia compliant, so they don't matter. So what Mufti Faraz Adam suggested was, if you can't check the balance sheets, this is difficult, you can use a proxy method. If you bought shares to hold, not sell, to hold, gain dividends, and when the time is right, maybe you'll sell in the future, then you will only give zakat on 25% of that portfolio. Not 25%, sorry. You'll give 2.5% on 25% of that on that account's portfolio or that stock's portfolio. For example, someone invested in Apple with the intention that I'm going to receive dividends. Now, his whole Apple portfolio, for the sake of an example, is worth $1,000, the whole thing altogether. Now, the zakatable assets of that portfolio will be 25%, so $250. He'll pay zakat, or he'll pay 2.5% on that $250. This is the proxy method suggested by Mufti Faraz Adam, which is easy for everyone to follow. We'll also, in the next slide, we'll break down how to check the balance sheets if we do not want to use this proxy method. Now, that's purchase to hold. Now, purchase to resell. You bought stocks for the sake of reselling. Your main intention at the time of buying was, I'm going to resell it. Then you'll pay zakat on that whole portfolio, not the proxy method. So if that portfolio of yours is worth $2,000, you'll pay zakat on $2,000 plus any dividends received. So zakat can be broken down into two: buy and hold or sell. Buy and hold, you only pay on 25% of your portfolio. Sell, you pay on 100% of your portfolio. And dividends received. Both you pay on dividends received. Now, the next slide. Business assets. So this is where we'll break down a few examples of things in a company that are zakatable or are considered zakatable assets or not. Fixed assets. Such an example is machinery, buildings, furniture. You own your own business. You have a property, you have equipment, you have furniture, you don't pay zakat on those items. The current assets, example, cash, stock in trade, receivables, etc. So this is for your own business or any company you invested in. These are zakatable. Now, one will pay zakat on the percentage of current assets in a ratio to his share value. For example, Imtiaz purchased $1,000 worth of shares in a company. 40% of the company's assets cover machinery, furniture, cars for use, etc. 60% of the company's assets are in the form of stock in trade, cash, gold, etc. You'll pay zakat on 60% of the $1,000, which is $600. So 2.5% of $600 will be zakatable in addition to dividends received. This was just an example. These numbers aren't really accurate, 40, 60%. That you'd have to check the balance sheet or the proxy method. Now, how can we use a balance sheet to determine the zakatable asset or the zakatable percentage for buy and hold or savings investments? The best way to do this is check the balance sheet. How will you check the balance sheet? Step one, you'd have to get a hold of the balance sheet. How would you do this? A quick Google search. XYZ is the company I invested in. So you search XYZ balance sheet or Apple balance sheet for the quarter or for the year. Step two, once you have the balance sheet in front of you, identify these zakatable assets on the balance sheet and add up their values. So what's step one? Get the balance sheet. Step two, identify the zakatable assets in the company and add up their values. What are zakatable assets in a company? Typically, they're trade and other receivables, inventories, derivative and financial instruments, investments, cash and cash equivalents. These are zakatable assets that any company would generally have. So you'd have to add up the value of all of these things. Non-zakatable assets in a company are intangible assets, property, plant, and equipment. You won't add that. So that's step 2. You identify these zakatable assets and add up the value of all zakatable assets on the balance sheet. So check the balance sheet, figure out what's a zakatable asset, add up the total. Step 3. Subtract deductible liabilities from the balance sheet. So liabilities the company has to pay. Subtract that from the balance sheet. What will be considered a deductible liability in companies you invest in? Current loans and other borrowings. They have loans from other individuals, other companies, from the bank. They have trade and other payables. They still have outstanding payments to make. And they have current tax liabilities. So you will deduct the liabilities. That's step 3. Step 4, divide the net zakatable assets figure by either the total assets or the market cap. Market cap you can also find online by making a quick Google search. Step 5, calculate the percentage of zakatable assets in the company. How would you do that? The total you get from step 4, from the division of the net zakatable assets. Multiply that by 100 to get the percentage. Step 6, apply the percentage to the value of your shares. What this will do is it will get you a monetary value. So if step 5, it will give you a percentage. If it gave you 15% and you had shares worth of, say for example, $100, 15% would be $15. You owe zakat on only $15. So 2.5% of $15, 36 cents. That's how you check a balance sheet. This is a bit difficult. If you have the steps, you can do it. But the proxy method is the easiest method. Assume it's 25% of the company. So if you bought with the intention of hold, you pay zakat on 25% of your holding. Unless you want to follow the balance sheet and figure out how much. If you can figure out, you can use the balance sheet method. Now that was just zakat on shares in brief. Now the rest is just closing notes. Paying zakat. Now we shouldn't delay in paying our zakat. Zakat is something that we went over the objectives of why we pay zakat. So it shouldn't be delayed to maximize benefit for ourselves and the one receiving. We don't want that burden on our heads. Now, one of the key aspects of zakat is intention. Intention must be made at the time of giving zakat to a qualifying recipient. We'll go over who the recipients are in 2 slides, I believe. Or to one's agent. So when you're separating the wealth, or when you're giving the wealth to someone who is a qualifying recipient, the intention has to be present, that the wealth I'm giving is zakat. You can't give someone wealth after he leaves, that wealth was zakat. The intention has to be made at the time of giving zakat or at the time of separating the zakat from your total funds or from your assets. For example, you have $100,000 in your bank, you have to pay zakat, $2,500, those are your total assets. At the time of separating $2,500, you say this is zakat. And then you go and give it out whenever, that's fine. Or when you're giving someone money, you intend that this is zakat. So that is intention. Now, we mentioned yesterday at the beginning that ownership has to be found when paying zakat, transfer of ownership. This is known in Arabic as tamlik. Zakat will only be considered paid when tamliq is found. What does tamliq mean? Tamliq means the transfer of ownership from the zakat payer to a needy person. Tamliq will only take place with the following conditions. Number one, the transferor must be the zakat payer or his agent, his wakil, the one who's in charge of distributing his zakat. Number two, the recipient must be an individual, not an entity, unless the entity is being made an agent. For example, we give our zakat to a charity and we make the charity our wakil, our representative to disperse our zakat for us. Then that's fine. But we can't give the zakat to the masjid and say this is for the masjid. Number three, the transfer must not be in exchange of any services. When you give zakat to someone, it can't be for work they did for you. And number four, the recipient must acquire possession and become owner of the funds unconditionally. You can't tell them how or where to spend the wealth. You give it to them, they can do whatever they want with it. These are the conditions of tamliq. Zakat is not valid without tamliq. Now, who are the recipients of zakat? Poor and needy. Who are those? Those who do not own any zakatable assets nor surplus assets beyond their personal assets that equal the nisab. So they own below the nisab. They are poor and needy. Number two, debtors. Those individuals whose liabilities exceed their zakatable and surplus assets. They owe money. They owe a lot of money. And the amount of money they owe would bring them lower or bring them to less than the nisab amount. You can give that individual zakat. So someone in debt, you can give them zakat. Number three, a traveler. Which travelers? These are travelers that don't have access to any of their funds. Number four, fi sabilillah. Those in the path of Allah. Meaning fighters in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can give them zakat. Why? Because they don't have access to their wealth. And number five, zakat collectors. These are zakat collectors commissioned by the government. So in Islamic State, they have actual zakat collectors who go, they check your wealth, and they take your zakat. You can give them your zakat, and they would distribute it to those in need. It will go to the Baitul Mal, and from there it would go to those in need. Who is not eligible to receive zakat? Number one, one's parents, grandparents, and children. So you can't give zakat to your immediate close relatives. One spouse, you can't give zakat to your wife. A non-Muslim, one of the key aspects to paying zakat is the one receiving the money must be a Muslim. Institutions, example, masajid, madaris, hospitals, and schools. We can't give them zakat unless we make them an agent to distribute our zakat to those who are eligible to receive zakat. So that's key. If we give them our zakat, we have to make sure that they are acting as our agents and they'll only use that zakat wealth where it is lawful and where it is permissible to be spent. Now we end over there. Just a few references. A book I suggest everyone reads, you can find a PDF online, is Zakat Made Easy by Mufti Faraz Adam. By far one of the best books we have on zakat in the English language. If you own a business, I highly suggest you invest in this book, the physical copy. If not, at least get the PDF and read this book. We'll end over there. If anyone has any questions, specific questions related to their personal zakat that they need help with, they can come to the office and ask their questions. If they need some clarification, they can come to the office, ask any question they have. Or if they need help with paying their zakat, how it should be paid, how it should be calculated, the easiest thing to do, if you want my assistance would be just send an email to imam@madinamasjid.ca or give it in writing, your total assets, your liabilities, what you owe, and we can help you calculate your zakat. Jazakumullahu khairan wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। तमाम हजरात से गुजारिश की जाती है आप सब बेसमेंट में तशरीफ़ ले जाएं इफ्तार के लिए। All brothers are requested, please go downstairs in the basement for iftar. There is a 10-minute left. Keep yourself busy, zikr and du'as. Jazakallahu khairan.